All right, welcome. If you've ever watched your crypto portfolio shoot up and thought to yourself, okay, what's the smart move now? Then you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into a really powerful strategy for turning those paper gains into real harvested profit. This is all about shifting from just reacting to the market to actually controlling your outcomes.
So let's just set the scene here. Your Bitcoin has just doubled in value. That itch to do something is huge, right? But what is the right move? Do you just smash the sell button? Do you listen to all the noise on Twitter? And how you answer that one question? Well, that's what really separates the amateurs from the masters. So you basically have two paths you can go down here. On the left, you've got the gambler's mindset, totally driven by emotion, right? Hype, panic, the whole shebang. On the right, though, is the master's mindset. This is about having a process and executing it with precision. But the real kicker, the most important shift, is this. A master measures their success in Bitcoin. How much more BTC do they have? Not just the dollar value.
Okay, let's get into it. We're calling this the art of the harvest. And let's be super clear about something right off the bat. This is not some course on how to trade or predict the market top. Nope. This is a course about control. This whole strategy really boils down to three kinds of control. First, control over your Bitcoin stack. The goal is always to make that stack bigger. Next, control over your risk, so you never ever get forced into selling when you don't want to. And finally, control over how you execute your plan. We're talking about making moves like a surgeon, not a gambler throwing dice.
All right, so that brings us to our first big principle, timing. Look, knowing when to harvest is just as critical as knowing how. And the secret? It's not about doing something all the time. It's about patience. Seriously, we're not jumping on every little 5% dip or spike. We are waiting for the moves that actually matter.
This lays it out pretty clearly, right? The difference between emotional triggers and strategic ones. A gambler harvests because they're bored or they saw some hype on Twitter. A master, they harvest for solid strategic reasons, like when the price has gone up a meaningful amount. Now, you might be seeing these words collateral and loan and wondering what's up. Basically, this whole strategy is about using your Bitcoin as collateral to take out a loan in stablecoins. So when your Bitcoin's value just explodes, your collateral is suddenly worth way more than the loan you owe. And that's the perfect time to harvest.
Let's make this real. Imagine you've put your Bitcoin into what's called a DeFi position. You lock up, say, 1.3 BTC as collateral. With that, you borrow 25,000 USDC. That's a stablecoin, so it's always worth $1. Now watch this. When Bitcoin's price doubles, bam! Your collateral is suddenly worth a small fortune. But your loan? It's still just 25 grand. You see that gap growing between the two? That is your profit opportunity right there. And here's the beautiful part. Because the price of Bitcoin is so much higher now, paying back that stable $25,000 loan costs just a tiny fraction of a Bitcoin, around zero point 0.1 BTC. Think about that for a second. You're using just a little chip of your now super valuable collateral to completely wipe out your entire debt. And here it is, the grand finale. After you pay off that loan, you walk away with 1.2 Bitcoin and zero debt. Let's recap. You started with 1 BTC. You finished with 1.2 BTC. That extra 0.2 BTC? That's your harvest, a real concrete gain. And it's measured in what matters, more Bitcoin.
Okay, so knowing when is half the battle. The other half? Flawless execution. This is where you really prove you've mastered the process. There is absolutely no room for guesswork here, no trying to find shortcuts. It has to be precise, deliberate.
So if you were to do this manually, it's a 7-step dance. You'd start by checking your position's health, then you'd have to carefully withdraw just enough wrapped Bitcoin to cover the loan, then you swap that for USDC, pay back the debt to unlock all your funds, and then pull out all your remaining Bitcoin. And the last step, probably the most important, is you have to verify that you actually ended up with more Bitcoin than you started with. It's a precise process, for sure, but as you can see, there are a lot of steps where things could go wrong, or you could get hit with extra fees. But there's a much better way. The professional method, as we call it. Tools like DeFi Saver's Repay feature basically automate this entire 7-step headache. It bundles the withdrawal, the swap, the repayment, everything into one single clean transaction. And the advantages here are just huge. You get a better price with lower slippage, that annoying difference between the price you think you're getting and the price you actually get. You also pay way less in transaction fees, and, this is critical,
You get rid of the risk of one of those manual steps failing halfway through. I mean, it saves you time, it cuts down on human error. It's just the smarter way to do it.
This is what's called an atomic transaction. What that means is the entire thing happens all at once. It either works perfectly or it fails completely and nothing changes. Your funds never leave your wallet. It's this all or nothing feature that guarantees you a clean, safe execution every single time. Okay, so now that we've nailed the full harvest, let's get into some more advanced plays. You see, mastery isn't just about following one recipe. It's about having flexible control. It's about you choosing exactly how much profit you want to take.
And that brings us to the partial harvest. Let's say Bitcoin is up, 30 or 40%. That's a solid gain, right? But maybe it's not the massive move you're waiting for. Well, you don't have to close out the whole position. Instead, you can use some of those gains to pay down, let's say, half of your loan.
So why would you do this? Well, there are 3 really good reasons. First, you're locking in some profit. Can't argue with that. Second, you're lowering your risk by reducing your loan-to-value ratio, which just makes your whole position safer. And third, you get to keep your position alive to catch any future upside. It's an absolutely fantastic tool for managing risk.
Now this right here, this is where the real separation happens. This is what separates the amateur from the master. See, after your first harvest, you don't just pack up and go home. No, you reset the engine. You start the next cycle with a bigger base, 1.2 BTC instead of just 1. And over time, these harvests start to compound, building on an ever larger foundation.
So let's zoom out a bit, from a single transaction to a long-term philosophy. A master understands one simple truth. Markets move in cycles. There will be boons and there will be busts. They always have and they always will. And that's not something to be afraid of. It's something to plan for. The amateur, they get one successful harvest and they either stop thinking they've won the game, or they get super greedy and try to perfectly time the absolute top, which is impossible, by the way. The master's view is totally different. They harvest, they reset, and they immediately start preparing for the next cycle. The process never really stops.
So, what does a master actually do after a successful harvest?
Well, first, and this is super important, they reward themselves. That's key for staying disciplined. Then they preserve that new capital, building up what we call dry powder for the future. They are patiently, deliberately preparing for the next bear market because they know that's when Bitcoin goes on sale. That's the next huge opportunity to build their stack even bigger. Look, at the end of the day, this entire system is designed to give you control in a market that feels, well, completely chaotic. The steps are clear. The tools are out there. The strategy is sound. The process gives you the framework. But the final question, that's for you. Do you have the discipline, the patience required for true mastery?